Hi, I've it's the end of the March already, 3 months into the year, and I've had a fantastic second half of the month. I've read 11 books. Because I'm reading the Otto Carnegie short list. Some of the books are very short, which is why 11 sounds amazing, but when you think that some of the books for young adults and some of them are very short. I started off the second half with one from the Otto Carnegies, and it's Until the Road Ends by Earle, and this is set in the Blitz. It's like if you're of a certain age like I am, you might remember the Homeward Bound film about the dog and the cat who make their way home, and it's a similar sort of thing. The dog Bo is absolutely attached to Peggy, but when she's evacuated to Devon, then he stays in London with her parents, and when they are killed in the Blitz, then he and the cat Mabel and a very feisty pigeon make the journey to try and find Peggy. And it's such a gorgeous story, absolutely. So that was that one that I started with. Then the next one that I read on the Carnegies was The Door of No Return by Kwame Alexander. And this is a verse novel, and it's about the Ashanti people and their story, and it's also about slave trade. Kofi is telling his story, and you find out about Kofi's family and the story that he's always told: stay away from the river, there are monsters in the river. And he finds the monsters, and they are not two-headed beasts, they are men with guns. And it's lyrical, it's graphic, it's hard-hitting, and the last quarter is so harrowing. Really, really is. And it's the first in a trilogy, apparently. So it does leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger. Then another one from the Carnegie. I listened to this one on Audible, and it's Steady for This by Nathanial Lessore. And it was super. I really enjoyed this one. You've got Sean, or his nickname is Growls, who wants to be a rap artist. He's likeable. He's got such a good heart. You get the impression that he doesn't listen a lot in school because of some of the errors he makes when his misunderstandings of things. You've got Alice in Sunderland, and he thinks polenta and placenta are the same thing, that type of thing. But he is the eternal optimist. And the family are being faced with eviction, and there's the competition he wants to enter, Raptology, and it's to do with friendship as well as everything else. And he is such a likable character. He really is. Then the fourth one from the Carnegies, and again, this was another verse novel, and it was Crossing the Line by Tia Fisher. And this was such a powerful book. And it was about something that I didn't know anything about county lines and the exploitation of young kids who are drawn into the gangs to be drug runners across the county lines. And you've got Eric telling his story. Eric lost his dad in lockdown. His mum is struggling to cope because they've got twins, and he's the oldest, and he gets drawn into a friendship, if you can call it that, with two older boys, and the opportunity for easy money. But he makes all the wrong choices, and he's in a situation that it is impossible to walk away from. And it is a very, very powerful read. It's a verse novel, and it's something that I didn't know about. Even though I taught for several years, I had no idea that things like this went on. Then I moved on to a NetGalley arc, and this is an arc that comes out on the 11th of April, and it's The Four by Ellie Keel, and it's a sort of dark academia. I think it's a crossover between, I'd say it's a crossover between young adult and new adult, and it takes place in a boarding school, and you're following these 4 16, 17-year-old kids who are scholarship students in this very elite place. So you've got the class difference. They are the scholarship kids amongst all this privileged people, privileged children who look down on them. And you've got bullying, you've got punishments. And these 4 kids, Sam, Sammy, Lloyd, Marta and Rose, they form a close friendship. And when there's an incident, Marta is immediately blamed. And the other 3 hide her. They make decisions that it's decisions that we would have made at that age. I don't know, but there are twists. The bounds of friendship are strained. You've got trigger warnings for abuse. You've got trigger warnings for rape. It is a very dark book. It really is. Then the first one from the Women's Prize for Fiction that I read, and it was 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster by Mirinae Lee. And this was the one that jumped out at me when the long list was announced. And the narrator is a middle-aged divorcee working in a Korean nursing home who writes the obituaries for the residents. She gets them to tell her stories, their stories. And you meet Grandma Mook, Mrs. Mook, who is nearly 100. She lives in the Alzheimer's wing, and she tells our narrator 8 stories that reveal her life as a spy, a mother, a murderer, a traitor. You've got all these different stories, and Mrs. Mook seems to be some sort of shapeshifter. You've got stories about abuse. You've got stories about her being a comfort woman in the Korean War for the soldiers. Is she reliable? You don't know whether the stories she's telling you are reliable. It's told in no chronological order, which you jump around a bit, which makes it sort of even a little bit more difficult to understand whether she is a reliable narrator or not. And then the ending brings some of the threads together. And she is a lovely character, Mrs. Mook. I liked her. Then another one from the Women's Prize for Fiction I listened to on Audible, and it was Soldier Sailor by Clare Kilroy. And this one moved me because it's the narrator is talking about motherhood, about her experiences of motherhood. And it's almost, and it brought back so many memories from when I was a new time mum. And I struggled as well because, sort of from having a career and suddenly being thrust inside 4 walls with a tiny little baby who has got his own agenda and doesn't want to work to yours. It's this things that resonated with me totally. You're left wondering whether it's a monologue, who she's talking to, whether it's a stream of consciousness. Is she writing a letter? She's talking to her son, who she always calls Sailor. But is she talking to him as an infant, or is she talking to him as an older boy, an old young man? You don't know. You're left to decide. And she talks about parenting him, the exhaustion, the frustration, the anger at her husband, who sort of comes in and comes in from work and just sits down and leaves her to carry on doing everything that she's been doing all day and not giving her a break. And that was a lovely read, and it was an emotional read as well. And then another one from the Women's Prize, and it was The Maiden by Kate Foster. And this takes as its basis a real life murder in 1679 Edinburgh. And James Forrester was murdered allegedly by Lady Christian Nimmo. And although nothing is known about Lady Christian, Kate Foster gives us Lady Christian's story. She gives us a story that is Lady Christian's. And you have a story here of the relationship between her and her uncle, James Forrester, and her desire to be loved, to be to be desired even. You've also got a prostitute, Violet Blythe, someone who doesn't appear in any of the stories of James Forrester, a fictional character, and her relationship with James Forrester. In fact, both women desiring revenge, excellent characters, and the prison scenes are really tense and harrowing. And then this one, when I find it, this was lent to me by a friend, The Authenticity Project by Clare Pooley. A warm, cosy read. I enjoyed this one. The premise is a little far-fetched maybe, but it works because it brings people together. You've got Julian, who's in his 70s, an artist, and he writes in a notebook, The Authenticity Project. He believes that nobody really knows anybody else. So he writes his story in this little green notebook, leaves it for somebody else to find. And then Monica finds it in her cafe. She reads Julian's story, adds her own, she leaves it, and so it goes on and on and on. This book is travelling around and it brings all these people together. And it is a nice, warm, cosy read. And then the last one I read was Off the Carnegie. 48 pages, 12 poems, Choose Love by Nicola Davies. And this one has now been shortlisted for the Carnegies. And it's all to do with the refugee experience. You've got 3 sections, each with 4 poems: departure, arrival, and healing. And each poem is accompanied by beautifully abstract illustrations, and the poems are heartbreaking and they're powerful. The one that struck me is called You've Got 5 Minutes, What Will You Choose? You've got 5 minutes to leave your life. What do you bring, what do you leave? And then you've got an interview where they have all these interviews and very often get rejected. Absolutely stunning book. So a lot of books for March. I mean, it helps with the Carnegies because some of them are so short, so you can whiz through them. But my book of the month, I am still sticking with The Songwalker that I highlighted in my first half of the month wrap-up. The story about these 2 girls crossing the Australian outback and the story of friendship and touching on the dream time and the culture. And I thought that was absolutely stunning. And I still think it's stunning now. And I'm hoping that it's reached the shortlist for the Carnegies. So I'm hoping that it can go on and win it. So a fantastic March. So let's see what April brings. So happy reading. Take care.